Well, the 2025 NHL Draft has officially concluded, and the St. Louis Blues walk away with three new prospects. In the first round, at 19th overall, the Blues selected forward Justin Carbonneau. Was he the right choice? What kind of player is Carbonneau? How has his hockey career gone so far? Where does he fit in the Blues system? What about the other two prospects that they drafted in the fifth and sixth rounds? Plus, in some recent news, the Blues have also signed their goalie Joel Hofer to a contract extension. So is that a good deal? We'll react to that as well. All that and more today on Note News. Welcome into another episode of Note News. John and Alec with you as always. We're here to recap the draft and react to the Blues picks in the 2025 NHL Draft. So super excited to get into this one. And then coming up pretty soon, in just a couple days, we got free agency starting too. So the off
Tuesday.
season, yeah, and by all indications, I mean free agency will be a frenzy as always. So hopefully the Blues will be active. It sounds like they've been pretty active on the trade market as well. So there could be some moves coming. So if you want to hear our reactions to the moves that they hopefully will make, as well as some speculation, we're going to continue to talk about that. We might even have an episode tomorrow previewing free agency. So keep an eye out for that. And the best way to do that, to stay tuned and then join the conversation whenever we come back on here, is to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Like this video, follow, rate, review wherever you listen, and then follow us on socials: Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. We post a lot of other great stuff, announce when we're going live, all that good stuff. Alec, the draft is over. The Blues, I mean, like technically, we can say it was uh, a very big draft if you count, Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg as as parts of that, which you probably shouldn't. But
23
the
year old draft picks.
That's right. That's right. The Blues only had three picks: one in the first, one in the fifth, and one in the sixth rounds, because they used their second round pick to offer sheet Philip Broberg last summer, their third round pick to offer sheet Dylan Holloway, and their fourth round pick to acquire Alexandre Texier from the Columbus Blue Jackets. So not a lot in the way of draft capital, but I think they still tried to make the most of everything. Um, First at 19th overall by selecting Justin Carbonneau. Um, a forward, a winger, and I
A
mean
winger.
I think for a team with so much winger depth, it was a little bit surprising for some. But Carbonneau's a great prospect, a great player. So we'll react to that pick. But first, I think we should get to know him a little bit. Um, I'm going to run through some of his stats and bio, and then I want to hear your take on the kind of player that you think Carbonneau is based on some of the things that you've seen. Um, but he's from Quebec. He's Canadian, and for the past few years, he's played for the. I'm gonna try not to get this wrong here, but the Blandville Boisbrand Armada in the QMJHL. Nailed it.
Nice.
Um, yeah, he's a right winger. He's 18 years old, 6'2", and 205 pounds. So not a small guy necessarily by any means. And as I mentioned, he's played with the Blandville Boisbrand Armada for a couple of years. His past couple seasons have been the the ones of note. In 2023-24, he played 68 games with them, scored 31 goals, 28 assists for 59 points. And then in this past season, 24-25, he played 62 games, was a lot more productive, scored 46 goals, 43 assists, 89 points. He led his team in points actually, and was second in the QMJHL in points. So really productive season for Carbonneau, who, you know, as a winger, I think. And one criticism of the Q is that it's not as competitive a league, and that production in the Q has to be kind of taken with a grain of salt. But still, I think 89 points for an 18-year-old is pretty impressive, especially for someone who profiles maybe as someone who's more of like a grinder, not necessarily like a sniper or sharpshooter or anything like that, but kind of more of a not a power forward either necessarily. But I guess I'm starting to get to the question. But what kind of player is Justin Carbonneau? I mean, what what have you heard about him? How does he profile to you? Yeah, what kind of player is he?
So Carbonneau to me is sort of like you're alluding to is kind of a mixture of a player. He's got some shooting to his game, but maybe not like a typical sniper, you would say. But I would say that's one of his better tools is his ability to shoot and score. But also he's like a playmaker, and
Yeah.
really likes to get involved in the offensive zone on rush chances and just moving the puck around the offensive zone. So to me, Carbonneau is like this weird hybrid. It's hard to classify his game, I guess, by the typical hockey metrics. However, he is like when the pick was announced, I was initially like a little confused because this guy was just so not on my board at
Sort of
all.
frowny
Uh,
face to me.
and that was a mistake. And now I'm more familiar with Carbo, and I see it because I can't believe I missed it because he was a total blues guy.
Yeah.
The biggest thing about Carbonneau is it's like he's a hyper forechecker on wheels. He is very raw in the skating department, but he loves to get involved on the play and steal pucks and yeah, get involved on the forecheck above everything else, which would yeah, like you are sort of alluding to would almost make you think more of a power forward. So he's like this weird like hybrid player, but he plays so hard and with such intensity that he's a total blues pick all the way. Kicking myself for this one for not like being in on Carbonneau before the hand. Just yeah, the upper half of his hockey ability is truly incredible. I think we'll get into maybe some of his downsides in a second, but Carbonneau's best is some of the best out of anyone who was drafted this year.
For sure. I think, I mean, like you said, he wasn't really on our board like when we talked about draft preview stuff and potential picks who might be available. And I think the reason for that is like the only winger we discussed or profiled really was, I think, Malcolm Spence. Is that right?
Mm.
Um, I really expected them to go center or defenseman in this one. Um, so I think that's why we didn't really talk about Carbonneau really necessarily. Um, but I mean, that said, like similar to you, I since they made the pick and as I've learned more about Carbonneau, it does seem like a great pick for the Blues. Um, but yeah, like not a power forward necessarily, but has some power in his game. I really like what I'm hearing about his sort of like hard driving, hard nosed play. He's a guy with high compete. Compete is one of the most important skills to me as a prospect because like the NHL draft is really just kind of like it's a guessing game a lot of the time, um, especially
For
like
sure.
out of the top, five picks or something like that, or top three depending on the year. Um, it's so hard to project what these players are going to become, but compete to me is like one of it's a skill or a trait that you can't really coach in to a prospect. Like it's something that I think a prospect that doesn't have it is going to have a really hard time developing. Whereas like someone who's like not the best skater, maybe they can improve, or someone who, doesn't have the best shot or whatever, maybe they can improve. I think compete is just more of like a mindset thing. Um, that it's a lot harder for a young player to sort of develop if they don't have it. And so hearing that Carbonneau is that guy, that he does have that high compete, um, I think that's fantastic and means good things for the Blues. As you said, he can hit and he's fast. He can skate pretty well. Um, I've heard the term playmaker used for him. I want to hear your thoughts on that because some people say he's a playmaker. I've seen other um, profiles on him that say he doesn't really have much playmaking capability. But I'm wondering if that like playmaking comes more from his ability to create space for himself, as in like he creates the play by becoming an option for whoever has the puck. Like I wonder if that's sort of or when he has the puck, he's a good puck handler and can sort of create a play by himself. Like I don't think he's from what I've heard and from what I've seen, what I've watched of him. I don't think he's a playmaker in the same sense that Robert Thomas is. Maybe he's a playmaker in the same sense that like a Dylan Holloway is. Like he can skate, he can get open, he can grind in the low areas. But yeah, what are your thoughts on his playmaking capability? I guess.
Carbonneau, I think, is just such a polarizing prospect. The reason that I personally I see so much variance in the playmaking is because I think he creates some really good plays, but his hockey IQ I would not say is one of his strengths. I think whereas like Dvorsky, even Holloway, and Snuggerud are all like such cerebral players, like they just see the ice with so much vision and creativity. Carbonneau doesn't necessarily have that like the upside on the playmaking side to be a Robert Thomas because he doesn't have to me the same hockey vision and IQ of those players. But what he does do really well is still create chances, more like almost the what I call the Cam Fowler approach, the quantity chances over quality chances. But he really likes to do things with the puck. Whenever he has the puck on his stick, he is looking to like hit a home run every time, which can be sort of I mean, it is a very boomer bust style of play, which I think it depends on the games that you're watching. And, our opinions on Carbonneau, I think, are still malleable as the pick was only
For
made
sure.
like 2 days ago. But I think definitely it makes a lot of sense. Like you said, that compete is just the Blues and Doug Armstrong's MO has been. If you look at all the players that they've targeted in free agency, in the offseason, in the draft, that's what they go after. They got another one. And I think there will be an ability for him to show what kind of playmaker he really is when we get to development camp and he can start to
Hmm.
play with some of these other complementary skill sets. Because, like you said, I think another part of this, at least for me, and maybe this is unfair, but is the Q that I'm still a little bit skeptical on what Carbonneau's true upside could be because his highlight tapes are awesome. They are
Yeah.
so much fun all across the board, but there's a lot of um, there's a lot of just like head scratching decisions, I guess, that he makes. And he's still a very
Yeah.
young skater, so I wouldn't even call them necessarily long term negatives. They're just sort of being honest about his profile at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of being a playmaker, I'd say he has upside to be um, a decent enough like assist getter and playmaker. I'd say he could be a pretty good assist getter, um, but he's not ever going to be the passer of like a Dvorsky or a
Hmm.
Snuggerud. Those are in a different tier. And so to respond to a couple things in the chat, first of all, Jimmy totally agreed. Carbonneau was the best player on the board, and that's why they drafted him. They said in the post game um, was that he was in the last in his tier, and so like a Hensler or another center probably would have been in the next tier down. Why they ended up taking him, and then Peter, it's still tough. I think I don't necessarily have a resolute opinion on this yet. I think I'm leaning. I think I'm leaning bottom of tier two as I warm up to him. But like a tier two prospect of like should be a good NHL player. I think he can contribute in a bottom nine role with a chance to be a star. Just like I don't think his chance to be a star is as close to something as like a Snuggerud, whereas Snuggerud could be like a 60-point player next season and get better. Carbonneau might cap out at 60 or 70 points in his prime, which is still a great player. So yeah, all of this is still being written on Carbo for sure, but I definitely like the pick a lot, and I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, I think we can sort of start to answer those other questions that I had. So, like, first of all, where does he rank in the blue system? Is sort of the question that Peter's asking. As far as my answer goes, I'm thinking like tier two makes a lot of sense for him. Um, I'd either put him because I mean like tier one, if we can still consider Snuggerud as a prospect, he may have graduated in some people's eyes. I think it just depends on.
I mean, he's going to be a rookie, so I think in
Yeah,
my head he's still a prospect.
yeah. So tier one, we've got Snug and Devo. Tier two, I see as Jiricek, and maybe you could put a Stenberg or a Lindstein in there. Um, I think he belongs in there. I might even put him above Jiricek just because we haven't seen much from Jiricek in a little while. Like I think Jiricek could easily leapfrog him again if he has a strong season. It's been a while since we've seen a full, healthy, and productive season from Jiricek, and so um, I might even put Carbonneau like third in the system. But if not there, then fourth, like under Jiricek to me. But again, as you said, our opinions are pretty malleable, and that could easily change in not that long a time. I just think, as I said, like his compete is high. The areas of his game where he's strongest, I see as like those are areas where successful NHL players are strong in, right? Um, Compete, physicality, decent speed, that kind of stuff. And so that's sort of my reasoning for being a little bit higher on him than maybe I initially was after the pick was made. But yeah, I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that. If not, my next question has to do with sort of future
I
projections. But yeah,
I
what
have
do you
a
got?
couple thoughts. Um, I do think this is very reminiscent of the Jiricek pick.
Hmm.
This is sort of the forward version of Adam Jiricek without the, I would say, without the health concerns probably, which is a big part of you know Jiricek's profile. Um, but this is another like home run swing, very boom or bust type draft pick, and they've been really hitting on all these guys, like exactly what Jimmy Snuggerud was when he was coming out, and now look how that's turning out for the Blues. So I would put him around the same level as wherever you view Jiricek,
Hmm.
is where I would put Carbonneau. I think they're pretty comparable to me. They both have offensive upside, defensive good enough, and a chance that they're special, and 50th percentile they're fine, and then a chance, like a non-zero chance that they don't work out. So,
Yeah.
but I think there's a lot to trust in this development staff, and wondering where he'll play next year too will be a big part of this conversation. Which I don't know if you want to get into that now or later, but yeah, I think that's what I got on Carbo. Just that he's a very similar to Udacek in my eyes, and uh, I think that they could end up being almost complementary pieces in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And as Jimmy said, we're so stacked on wing. Maybe maybe there is a deal to be made at some point in the future from the wing depth, and I got to imagine there will be something coming at some point, whether it's this summer or after some of these wing prospects have had a chance to develop. But yeah, as you started to get to there, and as Jimmy asked in the chat here, some of his post draft interview, like media availability. I think he was sort of he said he'd have to talk with the Blues organization, but he'll either return to junior in the queue or go to Boston College. It sounds like those are his two options right now.
BC, please.
I'm really hoping that he goes to Boston College. Like that would just be such a great next step and like
Yeah,
next level of competition for him because like he's like he was second overall in points in the queue. Like he has figured it out in the queue, right? It's time for the next challenge, I think. So I'm hoping he goes to Boston College. That's a great program, one of the best in the country, and so that could be an excellent next step for his development. So that's what I'm hoping for. Um,
same.
yeah, that would be ideal. And I got to imagine that the Blues are going to feel the same way, don't you think?
I'd like to think, yeah. It just the NCAA is such a good litmus test for the NHL because it is
Yeah.
such a competitive league. The
Yeah.
only worry there is it might be just like too much of a jump to go from the queue to the NCAA. But like you said, I just don't know how much left he could grow from
Yeah.
playing in the QMJHL. Like
Yeah.
it seems like he's achieved the heights that he's capable of there. Why stick it out? I don't know.
Yeah. I agree. Who led the Q in scoring? Was it Denier?
I'm not
No,
sure.
it was Jonathan Fauchon.
Oh.
Wow, Denoyer was fifth overall in scoring with 84 points.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like as an 18-year-old, second in the queue, like you said, you've probably grown as much as you can. So that's my hope is NCAA, like we both said. But what about like longer term future? One thing I like about him, some of those skills that I was talking about, and um, I like the idea of how those skills translate to the NHL. Um, I think he's got a pretty high floor for those reasons. Maybe not like the highest of ceilings, as maybe some of the other picks that were other players that were available at 19. Um, but I don't know. Like maybe you disagree with that, but I think he's got a high floor. And so as far as like where he projects in the NHL, I'm thinking like he seems to be a pretty classic example of like a solid middle six winger, um, probably second line at his peak. Just really competitive guy, um, really physical style, and so I think that could. I mean, because he seems a lot like Dylan Holloway to me. I think we can also get into some player comps here. Like Dylan Holloway is a comp that I've heard that I really like and that I understand based on like Carbonneau's profile. So if he's that kind of player, then second line would make a lot of sense for Carbonneau. But I think middle six winger is probably where he ends up. Um, but what do you think as far as his long term outlook, where he projects to sort of be once he gets into St. Louis if he stays with the organization that long?
Well, I do think he immediately steps in as the best winger in the system. I don't know if that's a controversial take, but
Other
I'm
than other than Snug,
okay, yeah, other than Snug. I guess
yeah,
yeah, that's right. Outside of Snuggerud, he's the second best winger in the system. But like he's
yeah,
to me, he leaps Stenberg, he leaps
yeah,
Yeko, Stansel, he leaps everybody.
yeah.
Um not a prospect anymore, but I think
Cheek, yeah,
better than what Bolduc was as a prospect. So I personally, I don't know. I personally have a little bit of a different draft profile on this guy. I think he's a little bit more to me just a boomer bust type style of player. That's how he plays hockey, and I think that's
hmm.
how I view him as a prospect too. Is that like I think he could have a decently low floor. There's a world where he just the skating is too raw and his mind isn't advanced enough and he makes too many dumb passes, too many giveaways, and just can't stick in affiliated leagues or in the NHL for sure. But I do think his ceiling is pretty high. I think his ceiling is first line winger. I think he could absolutely be like a something around a point per game player before even getting talking about who he's playing with on a line. I think Carbonneau just has such it's just such like this ball of energy and lightning on the ice that he there's such a chance for him to make a game to game like huge impact. And so if you want to talk about like comparables, are we talking about just on the Blues or in the NHL as a whole?
In the NHL too. I mean, I think we can start with what Carbo like said himself. He compared himself to Kyrou.
Jordan Kyrou, yeah.
He also
Which
compared
I
himself
really
to
like that comparison
yeah,
personally.
yeah, for sure.
I think
Um,
that's very, very accurate to what Carbonneau could be, is something like a last year Jordan Kyrou.
yeah, got a little bit of skill to his game. I think a little bit more skill to his game than we've seen from a draft pick in a little while.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, he also compared himself to Adrian Kempe as far as size, like his size, his speed, and his shot. And then he also compared himself to Travis Konechny with regards to like his mindset and sort of not being scared to go up against tough players or to go into tough areas to score goals. So like Kempe, Konechny, thoughts on those, or do you have any other comparisons to make about Carbonneau?
Yeah, I think that was making a lot of sense. To give one more Blues one, he honestly does feel like 70-80% of Jimmy Snuggerud. Like I think
Mm,
there's a lot of similarities there. I think he's got a good enough shot, not elite like Snuggerud's, but it's good. It's pretty good. I think he's. I just don't think he's the skater. I think that's the biggest thing. Is his legs just move. They're a little stiff. I guess he's very strong, but he's not very agile.
mm,
So if you could see that develop a little bit, I'd like to see that evolve in his game. But
yeah.
in terms of other skaters, off the top of my head, I can't pull any right now. But yeah, I just think with Carbonneau, it's just going to be this year is going to be, which is what we were saying about Unitech this time last year. I think this year is really going to set my opinion on the kid.
Hmm.
The upside is very high. I'm very excited to watch him, but I think I'm still sort of waiting in the wait and see camp with
Mm.
Carbo for the most part. Um, but I mean, I still think he's a very exciting prospect, and that's a real home run swing by Army and Steiner, which yeah, they've been doing, and boy, if they can hit on this one too, watch out. That'll be fun.
Yeah, so it sounds like I might be a little higher on his floor than you are.
hmm
Um,
But I might be higher
Interesting.
on his ceiling.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Um, yeah. Well, cool. So, I mean, it's sort of, again, you have sort of alluded to our next question, which is, did the Blues make the right pick? Like, this is the big question. At 19th overall, with what was available, uh, you also had Cameron Reed, Logan Hensler, a couple defensemen. You had Lyndon Likovic. Um, there were a
Fiddler,
couple. Sorry,
fiddler.
Fiddler, Zonin was available. Yeah, like guys like that. So I think so. Michael in the chat said that Army said he was the last in that tier.
hmm
He saw the Blues in, and so I think I agree. I think after Carbonneau, there was a big drop off for the skaters in this draft. Um, I think he was sort of like the last good forward, and I don't think any of the defensemen that we were kind of thinking about, like Hensler or Reed, um, are in the same tier as a guy like Carbonneau, and so I think this was the right pick. And I think if he wasn't available, and it was like there wasn't someone of a comparable tier. It sounds like from some of the comments that Armstrong has made, they would have been willing to maybe trade back if there wasn't really anyone there that they were crazy about. Maybe get a second and a third rounder. Um, so I mean, I think that's interesting. It seems like maybe Carbonneau was the last guy they were willing to take it at 19. But what are your thoughts on was this the right pick based on what else was available at that 19th overall at that point?
hmm The thing about this pick that really excites me over all else is that the process for Army and Co, as expected, but was just so good. Hearing Michael put in the chat like that comment about how he was the last in his tier and so they were going to go best player available no matter what. That is just such smart, wise process to take for the first round of the draft, that it's so valuable or it's so important, excuse me, to recognize where you're at and just be realistic with who's on your board and who's where. And the other thing I would say about that is if it's the right pick is that it's the one Doug Armstrong made. So yeah, it probably is the right pick. Doug Armstrong has a really,
Yeah.
really good track record, especially in the first round, which we had been talking about ad nauseum leading up to the draft. There's a reason for it because I mean, go check out the guys' drafts. They've been pretty insane in the earlier rounds and even some into the middle or back half. But um, I just think that the way they went about it is exactly the type of mindset that they should have. Is exactly the type of mindset that Steen should have when he takes over,
Hmm.
um, and just would set up this team so well for success into the future as well. like as you're probably going to be picking more in this range for years to come, to get a guy of Carbonneau's caliber is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that if we pick at 19 next year, even though this is a quote unquote weaker draft, that we can get someone with the upside of Justin Carbonneau, at least not with the ability that he does have. So I I do think it was the right pick. I think it was a very smart pick, and I'm excited for what could be.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both like the pick. Okay, so what about the other picks? I don't think there's like as big a conversation to have here. Um, but at pick 147, and I should say after we discuss these later picks, we'll also talk about the Hofer extension. So that's some other big news in Blues land. So stick around for that. Um, but in the fifth round, right at pick 147, the Blues took Mikhail Fedorov or Fyodorov. Um, he's a Russian player. He's a left shot winger. The profile on this guy is that he's got a good wrister and he's good at creating space. A lot of not a lot, but the scouts that have evaluated him like his shot a lot, especially his wrist shot. Say it's pretty deceptive. He doesn't really need a lot of pullback and can just get it off pretty quick off the pass and things like that. And then with their last pick at 179, they get Love Harenstam, who's a goalie. Is he a Swedish guy? I'm pretty sure he is.
I'll look that up.
But he profiles sort of as more of an athletic goalie rather than like a strategic or cerebral goalie. Relies on his skill, his agility. Say again?
Swede confirmed.
Swede confirmed. No surprise there. But yeah, like I was saying, more of an athletic goalie, like relies on his agility and his sort of physical ability to make saves rather than like his positioning or his brain, I guess. Um, I've seen some like reports that are pretty high on this guy, and some that aren't so much. So it's tough to really like project with guys that are this low in the draft. But do you have any thoughts on either of these guys? I mean, it's interesting. We got another winger and a goalie, so no centers taken and no defensemen taken. What are your thoughts on these two picks, and then I guess the whole draft as well?
In terms of okay, on Fyodorov, I just, to be honest, I can't really say a ton. I've read up on his page. I haven't watched any tape just yet, but I've seen people online say that it's a good pick for where they were picking. I will defer to that, and I think there's reason to think that this could be maybe a tier 3 or tier 4 like trade piece. And we'll see if maybe he turns into a Pekarchik. That's what I would be watching for Fyodorov.
Yeah.
And then in terms of Harenstam,
Harenstam.
yeah, I would say just personally, I prefer the goalies who are more cerebral rather than physical tools. I feel like goalie is a position where physical tools can lead to like overconfidence and mistakes that way. But yeah, people like him in the goalie prospect world. So that's again what I will, until I form more of a resolute opinion over these guys over the coming month. I think for where they were picking, yeah, solid enough. And to get a goalie in the draft, so now to go more big picture, to get a goalie in the draft was a really valuable use of assets for sure. You definitely would have liked to see them shore up the center core or defense core, but they only had 3 picks. You can really only address one need, and the need they chose was goalie of all things. But at least they, in some ways, did draft for need. It's hard to say if it was best player available in the 6th round, but I think that I think the process was really good, and I am hopeful for these guys. I think that there's reason to I think there's reason to trust Army and Co. But the way that they approach the draft makes a lot of sense looking back, even if it's not a way that me as a fan would have considered coming into the draft, which is a reason that they are getting paid a lot more than than I am to do that job. Um, but um, that's why I appreciate how they went about like addressing a need, but also not sacrificing your board with the Carbonneau pick. And
Hmm.
then probably you could say the same with the Fyodorov pick. Is just that it was a player that they thought could become something like could elevate his draft stock above where um, he was picked, something like a Pekarchik, and now everyone is really excited about Pekarchik. So I don't know. I trust Army.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was interesting. I mean, Sam got it right. First of all, we had Sam Kohler on to preview the draft a few days ago, and he said he'd be really surprised if the Blues didn't come away with a goalie. So he called his shot on that one, and they do come away with a goalie. I thought it was interesting. Quote from Armstrong. Um, let's see. He said, "We took three defensemen last year. We'd like to smooth out our depth chart." I think that was when he was asked about taking Carbonneau at 19 instead of like a Hensler or a Reed or someone like that. Um, so I think that's interesting, and a lot of the names that we think of when we think about the Blues prospect system are those forwards. You got Devo, Snug, Stenberg, guys like that. But looking like at the rest of maybe like their top 15, for example, you got a lot more defensemen that work their way into that. You got Yurchek and Lindstein at the top, but you also have like Lucas Fisher, Colin Ralph. Those are solid like potential bottom four guys. You have Quentin Burns down there, Michael Buchinger. There are kind of like a lot of defensemen. Not saying that these are like all gonna hit or that these are all like crazy top prospects or anything like that, but you look at what they have at the top of their system. There's a fair amount of defensemen in there, so mixing in a little bit of you know forward depth or smoothing it out, as Army said, I don't think is a terrible thing at all. So it's hard to like give the Blues like a good grade overall just because they didn't like make their system like a lot better or anything, but it was just because there weren't a lot of picks to do that with. So I think with what they had, they did a solid job. I'd give them like a B plus, something like that. What do you think overall?
Yeah, grading the draft overall, they just didn't have a lot of assets, so I don't know that there was ever going to be. This is a tough question because I don't know that there is even a world where they receive an A for this draft.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's possible, even
Yeah.
if like miraculously Eklund had fallen to them and they took Eklund and nailed their fifth and sixth round picks. I still think that'd be like an A minus draft. Like I just think with three picks, there's so with that caveat in mind, I think a B is fair. I think a B is right. But it's not like a B like you kind of missed out on value here. They really maximized value that they had. It's just that they kind of punted on this draft, which we'll see that could have ended up being a really wise strategy.
Yeah, could be. All right, well let's turn our attention to talk about the other big news that has happened in Blues land. The Joel Hofer extension. The
Yeah,
the Blues silenced the haters, or I guess the prospective thieves, or whatever you want to say. Um, it was funny in their post. They put like something about no offer sheets for Joel Hofer now or something like that. So throwing a little bit of shade maybe. Um, but yeah, Joel Hofer backup goaltender for the Blues. Was a pending restricted free agent. They signed him to a 2-year, $6.8 million extension. So that's 3.4 million AAV. Um, based on some like based on the big picture, this is a relief, right? Like this is something that we were like
for
get it
sure.
done, like we were calling for a while ago. A lot of Blues fans
A
were, and
year
so
ago.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so like definitely good that they got it done, but not super surprising, especially given some of Armstrong's recent comments. Like a week ago, he said you can go after him, you're not going to get him. Was basically what he said. Love it. Um, love that he just came out and said that. So um, yeah, so they hold on to him for a couple more years. And the interesting thing is, right, like Bennington has 2 seasons left on his contract as well. Um, so these two are lining up to need new contracts at the same time. Um, so I guess first we should answer what are your thoughts on the Hofer deal? Do you think this is a good extension, fair pay, fair value, that kind of stuff? Yeah, reactions to the deal itself.
Oh, it's a terrific extension. Oh, sorry, throat just dried up. I think it's an absolutely phenomenal deal. They got Hofer at great value for someone who proved to be a very good as a floor is a very good number two
Hmm.
to be paid. What was it, 2 by 3.4? That is
Yep.
incredible. I do think I'm very surprised that this market has not been as insane as I think people thought it was going to be. Now we haven't
Hmm.
hit free agency yet,
Yeah.
but like all the deals, there hasn't really been a unreasonable deal signed so far. Well, okay, I guess there's like the Trent Frederick contract and the Brock Nelson deals that were just like funny, but those are unreasonable for different reasons, for term more than value.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I they got Hofer on a fantastic deal, and to get it done before the July 1st deadline is terrific, and
Hmm.
yeah, just to have your goalie tandem shored up for the next 2 years as a minimum and probably into the future is fantastic. I really think this is also kind of a prove it deal for Hofer, as potentially like we think you're really good. Go out and prove that you deserve to start in the regular season over Jordan Binnington because there's a chance for that upside. You know, he's 6'5". Typically, taller goalies don't perform as well. Hasn't held him down at all. Um, I'm not saying that I think they necessarily should or will start him over Binner. I just think that there's a possibility. There's a world where that happens just with the talent that Hofer has. So to get him for 3.5 million per year is incredible. Great job by the Blues.
Yeah, agreed. And not too bad for Hofer either, right? He was just making 775,000. It's a pretty decent pay bump, right? So, not too bad for him either. I think both sides are pretty happy, and that's what you want.
I
Um,
think this was on the like the lowest end that I said what a potential Hofer deal or offer sheet could have been was
yeah,
like 3.5, and it ended up at 3.4. So
yeah,
what do I know? Way to go, Army and Co. Bar.
yeah. So Hofer, um, in 30 games last year, 265 goals allowed average, 914 save percentage, and then in 31 games this year, had a 265 goals allowed average again, but a 904 save percentage. Of those games, Hofer only started 27. Bennington started 55. Actually, no, excuse me, that was in 2023-24. Benner started 55, Hofer 27. This past season, Benner started 54, Hofer 28. So it seems like they've got a split worked out between these two. At what point, or do you think we will see Hofer start to take on some more responsibility? Like, do you think it's just Bennington's net until the 2 years are up? Do you think Hofer will sort of earn himself more of a 50-50 split? Um, how do you think the rest of these 2 years will play out? And then at the end of the 2 years, Hofer will still be an RFA, so they'll retain his rights, but Bennington will be an unrestricted free agent, contest the market if he wants. Do you think they'll extend Bennington past the next couple seasons? Do you think Hofer will be the number one long term? It might be too soon to say, but let me get your thoughts on how the goalie situation in St. Louis will look moving forward.
I do totally think a lot of this is going to get decided in the coming seasons. I think as things stand right now, it's sort of tough to impossible to predict exactly what's going to happen. But if I had to give my best guess, I would say what I think is most likely is what happens is that they move on from Ellis, they trade away Ellis for some like 2, 3, 4C help. They Hofer continues as the backup and maybe does outperform Bennington by a hair in the regular season, but not enough to take over and earn the starting job. I think Benner remains your starter throughout the remainder of his contract, and I think he gets another contract in it, and you just have Hofer. Hofer probably gets another 2-3 year deal or something. And maybe he plays it out and maybe he doesn't play it out. But I think that now, especially that we're seeing the goalie pipeline start to dry up a little bit, I think probably this is the tandem going forward for the next 2 years at least. And I think it most almost definitely will stay in the same alignment that they have it now.
Yeah, for sure. And as someone said in the chat, at worst, solid 1B moving forward. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it was interesting. Whereas like the split itself this past season didn't change a lot from the previous season. They still went, roughly 55-27. It was 54-28 this year. Um, I think what we saw was the starts that Hofer drew were against some more difficult opponents than in his first season, right? They sort of were giving him more responsibility in the quality of opponent he was facing rather than the share of the starts he was getting. I thought that was interesting, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them, find a way to continue to challenge him. I mean, I think it's obviously still Benner's job. I don't think Hofer is going to really like steal it away from him in the next 2 years, unless Benner leaves or is traded or something like that. But I think they can still find ways to give Hofer some more responsibility. Maybe he earns himself like 5 more starts, something like that. So yeah, really interested to see how the rest of this deal plays out. Pretty happy with it as well. Good value, doesn't set them up for like, doesn't like tamper, or I guess hamper them in any way is the right word. So yeah, excited that he'll stick around. I like the guy. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Hofer deal or the draft or anything like that?
I think we're starting to see the plan of the past couple of years coalesce and start to form.
Yeah.
Even going back to like the Ryan O'Reilly, Vladimir Tarasenko trades of getting first round picks back, starting to see like that was when, this team fully embraced this whatever. I'll call it a retool, but whatever it was, that's the moment when they really started to be honest, look at themselves in the eye and say like, we are not going anywhere with this current core. How can we compete and compete again soon? And what they saw was that they had Jimmy Snuggerud waiting in the wings, that's a piece you can build around. What they saw is that they had Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou on the trajectories that they were at the time. I don't think either of them were the player that they are right now. And so seeing how those two were able to develop, and what you saw was Colton Parayko and the boys needing a defensive overhaul, and just progressively through over the years, they've taken steps to address that. Drafting like Lindstein, who's next in line to be basically the next Colton Parayko. Drafting Dvorsky as a Robert Thomas or as a 2C. Looking at, Ryan O'Reilly was playing 1/2C for us with Robert Thomas. I can't remember exactly the alignment back then, but now we've just gotten rid of that need for us, so that's going to be a need. And all these pieces are starting to come together, and I think Carbonneau is the next step of that. Looking at, there's been a lot of buzz around Kyrou. I really, really, really don't think he gets traded before Tuesday. But, there's been a lot of buzz for years now. Maybe 1 year it happens. Now that backup plan can at least, they can tell themselves that they have it there. I still don't think that is going to happen, but now at least you're starting to see this plan build on itself. And when the crop of guys like Bolduc and Holloway and Neighbors are all in line for paydays, then you're going to have Carbonneau right there and Stenberg waiting in the wings to fill in that depth and be the cheap options. So I think when Army said filling out the depth chart, even though we're already so deep at wing, it's not about getting more players at the wing. It's about recognizing the timeline that they're on and understanding how this team is going to look when it's their time to play, and taking steps to anticipate that I think they've done a really phenomenal job with. And I just have to give credit to this front office for being so proactive about the future. And just think about how good of a year of development of all the players on the roster that Alex Steen is getting right now. as maybe the highest riser in the system, as I say, sort of tongue in cheek, obviously. But yeah, I am starting to see the vision of this Blues team, and it's got me pretty excited.
Yeah, I agree with everything there. Really excited to see, especially how this next season plays out for the team. Should be really fun. But before we can get there, we've got a long summer to go, including the start of free agency in just a couple of days. I think Alec and I will be back with you tomorrow evening to sort of preview free agency, which begins on July 1st. So we only have a couple days left. So we want to make sure we get one more free agency preview episode in. So we'll be back tomorrow evening. So stay tuned for that one. We'd love to have everyone back in the live in the chat and giving us your thoughts on free agency, the trade market, and all that stuff. There's been a lot of Jordan Kyrou rumors. We'll talk about some of that before his no trade clause goes into effect. So we'd love to have you back. We'll talk about trades because it seems like maybe Armory will be wanting to make a trade. We'll talk about free agency, all that good stuff. So we'd love to have you back. I think that'll do it for us this time. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're almost at 400. I think we only need like a couple more. So if you haven't already, hit that button. We'd really appreciate it. Like this video as well. Follow, rate, review wherever you listen. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Really does help. And then follow us on socials, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at No News Pod. Engage with us over there. We love to have everyone in the comments and talking to us over there. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time, and let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues. Justin Carbonneau.